Good morning, friends. Hello. Hello, everybody. How are you today? I'm going to move this over here a little bit. All right, a little better. How are you today? I hope this weekend has brought you some goodness and grace, and that we begin this week together in some joy. So I hope you are having a great time. Good morning, Donna. Great. Good morning, everybody. And yes, good morning, everyone. Like, really, welcome, 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 all of you, part of this journey. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. There's everybody. I got to see Jamie here this weekend, which was really a joy. Just happened to bump into her, which is always a rich time. So that's great. Um, Good morning, John. Glad to see you. Hello, Jane and John. Jane and I owe you and John a message. I so appreciated your note about some of the improvements we can make, and so I'm going to actually send you a message today about that because I need John's help. So I hope you'll help me out, and to kind of make things, we can make things a little better. Doing okay. Visit with daughter and family in cottage on Sunday. Oh, very nice. Boy, beautiful day for it, too. That is nice. I'm glad you were out and about, and I hope everybody's well. Good morning, Irene. How are you? Hope you're doing great. Hope things are well on your end. Good morning, everybody. It is the 12th day of July on this 11/11, and welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're a part of this journey, and I'm glad that I get to see your little digital faces pop up here, and and those of you who are going to continue with us throughout the day, welcome, welcome. I hope this can be just a tiny respite for you in this world, and that know that you are prayed for and that you are loved in these days. So just a couple of notes. One of the beloveds of our church passed this last week, and I wanted to just make sure to hold that up. I'll actually probably might talk about him a bit tomorrow, if that's okay. And that Rick Dreyer passed into the next life. And if you never got the opportunity to know Rick, you were deprived of something because he's really an amazing guy. So we might say a few words about him tomorrow, but just keep the Dreyer family in your prayers, as well as Karen. Her husband lost his mom recent, so please keep them in your prayers. Keep Bill in your prayers, and that they might know some grace and some peace in these days as well. So, because that's what we do here, we care for each other, and we pray for each other, and we encourage each other, and that we message each other, and we make snarky comments on the live feed, and we enjoy each other's presence as much as it can be manifested in this little digital space. But it can be a little bit, right? It can, and it has been. And so today I want to start with this from the 5th chapter of Romans. It's the beginning of the chapter of Paul to the church in Rome. He sets this whole thing up, and he has this little short piece that he says, and it's one of these therefore statements. Paul is really big on these therefore statements. Therefore, because he makes these kind of he is Roman, and he is Jewish by lineage and training. So as he steps into to proclaiming Christ, he has almost this legalistic way, and not that he's legalistic, but he has this way in which he builds his case every time he's talking. So if you ever read Paul and you get that, like you're getting it right, because he builds this kind of logical case, and so he says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, since we've been made whole through faith, since our relationship with Christ is healing us. That's what he's saying. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace, in which we now stand, and we boast in the hope of the glory of God. We boast in the hope of the glory of God. Hear that again. We boast in the hope of the glory of God. We boast in the hope of the glory of God that we declare in the world. And when he's talking about boasting, remember, he's talking about this declaration to the world. It's not this prideful, like, it is this declaration of this, come see the accolades, come see the trophies on the wall, come see that which has been accomplished for us. We boast. We are confident in the hope of the glory of God. That is the beauty of this. That is the wonder of it. That is the majesty of what it is to be alive and to walk this path. And I want to, and I find this, I want to encourage us in this. I'm grateful for Len Sweet for some of his work and what I'm drawing on today. But this, he's a huge Kierkegaard fan. He actually named his daughter Soren. Now Soren's a male name, so but he loves Soren Kierkegaard so much he named his daughter Soren. And and he reminds us of the story that comes from the Kierkegaard used to tell about geese. And he said that there were these times in which the geese, every seventh day, would parade around the courtyard in the barnyard, and their most eloquent orator would stand up and jump up on the fence and speak to the geese about the exploits of their forefathers who dared to mount upon wings and fly all over the sky and above the farm. He spoke of the mercy of the Creator who had given geese wings and the instinct to fly. And all of the geese would listen to him every seventh day with rapture, and they would nod their heads solemnly. And all of them did this. But the one thing they didn't do is they didn't fly. The corn was good. The barnyard was secure. Why take the risk? But the reality of life, friends, is that life is risk. I think if the past couple of years have taught us anything, is life is about risk management to some degree, and the illusion, and maybe breaking the illusion, that we can actually manage any of that risk. I mean, that's a great corporate kind of idea. The Army was huge with ideas of being able to do a risk assessment or do risk management, so that to make sure nobody got hurt going on particular operations or things going on. But it's really a falsity, isn't it? I mean, who do we know that gets sick? And for all the right living and good things that they've done, and yet who knows that gets in a car accident for all of their wearing of seatbelts and looking both ways? Who do we know that is brokenhearted, even though they sought all the right ways to pick a partner? That this notion that we can mitigate this risk is us kind of hanging out in the barnyard and never quite taking the risk. And this is the thing that Paul is trying to drive to the Romans, because this is the Romans. Their church in Rome. They're kind of all huddled together like a little bunch of ducklings, trying to not attract attention, not get in trouble by the authorities. And here is Paul saying, we boast in the hope of the glory of God. To boast, and that this glory is bigger than this world. If you've spent any time with me, I'm a big believer in the fact that we're not about, that the sweet by and by is great and the sweet by and by is awesome, but that Christ is actually important enough, central enough, big enough, wise enough. In fact, it is Christ that inflates our lungs with every breath and gives us heartbeat with every moment. That this is all so much enough that even that we don't that if even if the sweet by and by did not exist, we could still live and boast in the glory of God. And you kind of know that's my. But I think there's value in remembering that first, the harsh but maybe comforting reality that kind of no one here gets out alive, that we are in fact, on our journey, on the journey somewhere, and that in this journey and in our journeying, there is better things yet to come. And that's what Paul is trying to get to the church in Rome, is to say, stop the fighting amongst yourselves, stop the fighting with the world, but have faith and boast in the hope of the glory of God, the glory of God that's going to raise us up into the next life, that's going to come and let us and unite with Christ Himself, with all the hosts of heaven, and with in a more beautiful and more wonderful and more gorgeous way than we ever could have imagined. And that to live our lives out of that. That's what he's talking about when he says boast. He's not just stand around and brag. He's saying live in such a way that the hope of the glory of God is constantly informing the decisions you're making, the ways in which you're living life, the ways in which the things that and the willingness to take the risks, and the management of it. Well, and this is not to be foolish, but it is to be confident in God's love and God's grace and God's wisdom and God's providence that will overcome all the things that come apart. Will sew up all of the things that have come unthreaded, that will put together that which has been shattered in ways that we can't even imagine and we don't even know. This is a story it's been around for a while, but I want to share it with you just because it's so sweet and it's such an important reminder of how we can move through this day, how we can move through this life, and what we can do in order to have that confidence, to have that boasting in the hope of the glory of God, and to know and to hear that, to boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not that we're living all blissed out all the time, like not that, but that we know that whatever the struggle, whatever the pain, whatever the brokenness, whatever the decay of the body, whatever the defeat of the soul, whatever the loss of the mind, whatever it is, there's a hope in it, and that the hope is overcome the brokenness in the glory of God. And so the story goes like this. There's a young woman who's been, and this story comes from a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. There's a number of them, and this is the third Chicken Soup for the Soul. And so it is, in fact, a true story that as it's been told, that it's been back and forth about whether it was an apocryphal story or it's a real story or whatever. But by all reports, this is actually a true story. That there's a young woman who's diagnosed with terminal illness and had been given 3 months to live. So she was getting her things in order, and she contacted the pastor and had him come to the house to discuss the certain aspects of her final wishes and what she wanted done. And she told him that which song she wanted in the service and the scriptures she'd like read and what outfit she wanted to be buried in. And when everything was put together, the pastor was preparing to leave, and the young woman suddenly remembered something very important. And she said, "Oh, there's one more thing," she said excitedly. "What's that?" said the pastor. He says, "This is very important," the young woman continued. "I want to be buried with a fork in my right hand." The pastor stood looking at the young woman and not knowing quite what to say. "Well, that surprises you, doesn't it?" she said. And he says, "Well, honestly, I'm a little puzzled," said the pastor. And the young woman explained, "My grandmother once told me this story, and from there on out I have always done so. I have also always tried to pass along its message to those I love and those who are in need of encouragement." In all my years attending church socials and potluck dinners, I always remember that when the dishes of the main course were being cleared, someone who would inevitably lean over and say, "Keep your fork." It was my favorite part because I knew that something better was coming, like velvety chocolate cake or some deep dish apple pie, something wonderful and something with substance. So I just want people to see me there in my casket with a fork in my hand, and I want them to wonder, what's with the fork? And then I want you to tell them, keep your fork. The best is yet to come. The pastor's eyes welled up with tears, and he hugged the young woman goodbye. He knew this would be one of the last times he would see her before her death, given her condition, but he also knew that the young woman had a better grasp of heaven than he did. She had a better grasp of what heaven would be like with the many people twice her age, with twice as much experience and knowledge, and she knew something better was coming. At the funeral, people were walking by the young woman's casket, and they saw the pretty dress that she was wearing and the fork placed in her right hand. Over and over, the pastor heard the question, "What's with the fork?" And over, he smiled. And during his message, the pastor told the people of the conversation he had with the young woman shortly before she died. He also told them about the fork and about what it symbolized to her. Friends, boast in the hope of the glory of God, for the best is yet to come. And you can rely on that. I don't care if you're 9 or you're 90. The best is yet to come. And that allows us, knowing that we can boast in that hope, we can live out of that hope, knowing that there's nothing that can assail that hope, that can tear it apart, that can thread it or separate it from us. We can live in such a way that puts fear in the rearview mirror, that lets us set down our petty competitions and our hatreds, that lets us open in vulnerability to the people around us because we know we can't really be broken anyway, and that we can hold up our fork when, with the declaration that the best is yet to come, we can boast in the hope of the glory of God. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today. I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're with us. I hope that you find this day a sweet one. We'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11. Peace and grace, y'all.